Hey there, internets. Saturday evening rant, take two, because I had to cut partway out so you didn't all have to listen to dogs trying to reply back to the police siren. So let's talk about something else that happened this week. Sweden and NATO, or Finland, applied to join NATO, and because your friendly Clear Lake Precinct Committee officer is kind of the argumentative sort, I, of course, threw in a comment on the Task and Purpose channel that was discussing, are they ready, and are they ready for a potential war with Russia, because Russia has locally kind of been an aggressor. And I said, I don't want them in. And there's a couple of reasons for this. For one, they were part of the non-aligned movement. Now, you'll hear me say this in the future, and I've said this in the past, they're the neocons, what I call the hate America left, but they're the liberals that think we shouldn't spend on the military, we should never spend as much, and the Ron Paul style libertarians all share three things in common. They project their values onto other people, they are poor students of history, and they also do not consider the consequences of their actions. So two of those are kind of the focus here. Poor students of history and the consequences of their actions. You see, when I look at this, I have to say, why are they suddenly now joining NATO? That's the first thing. For 50, 60 years, they could only get 30% of their population, 33% of their population to want to join NATO. And Russia gets froggy and decides to invade Ukraine. Now suddenly they want to. And as some of you know, and you're all going to know now, I've played a game called Travian. It's a strategy game. And it's one of the early ones like that. And shout out to everybody in Dark Order, and that became Poor Choices, and I think it was Drunken Disorderly as we finished the second server. After we went first US one, then Anglosphere one, then we did another Anglosphere, and the third Anglosphere, and I can't even remember off the top of my head what we called the Alliance by then, but people were dropping. Shout out to the people in that were leadership with me. It's kind of like these people that in that game, they would join an alliance pretty much for the protection and do nothing but sim if you could even get them to do that. That's kind of my concern. Why are they wanting to join us? Russia's getting aggressive. They could sit there and say, we're neutral, just like we've always been. And doing this outside, we get to hear some thunder. So hopefully I don't get dumped on. So you get these people that would join an alliance, kind of sim, and not do much. Now we going back to the comparison on this. They were chronically small accounts, and usually they got kicked from the good alliance because we won a couple of servers. We won 3, and we gave them a run for their money on the first US one. We didn't have a lot of chance, but we played hard, or the final US one. But there'd be these people that would go and join a smaller alliance just for the alliance tag, and they just sim all server if they didn't get run off, or sometimes they wouldn't stick out the server. And that's something that we have to consider. Are these guys going to really be there for the long haul? And I have concerns about that, because now they're suddenly wanting to join when they didn't before. They're effectively caught between the West and the same people as before, just a little different ideology, because the Russians have abandoned communism, and that's a good thing. But you gotta think about that. And then the main stated reason I said I don't want anyone in there that's spending below 2% of GDP, which is why I'll also say they ought to just kick out France and Germany and Turkey and Spain and Portugal and the Czech Republic and Slovakia, Bulgaria, you're on that list. Turkey's fallen below the 2%, and Albania and several Denmark. I mean, seriously, Denmark, you're talking about getting up to 2% of GDP by 2033. Why don't you just say you're not going to do it? And that's something that all those countries I listed are on the list of not spending 2% of GDP on their defense. And Finland and Sweden are also in that book. They are chronically, like the others, below, and Turkey just recently, in the last couple of years, must have fallen below 2%, because before they were above it. Greece is above 2%. They weren't. The Baltic states have gotten their act together. They're at 2% of GDP. Poland has been at 3% of GDP for a long time. The UK has been above there. Iceland, you've never spent a dime on your defense. Seriously? If we were doing Travian and I was counsel, I'd be like, if that was a Travian account, I'd be like, chief it and farm it. Kick it out. Because I could not stand people that weren't active. And granted, real life is not a game, but there's a parallel here. Some people don't want to have the protection of everybody else, but they don't want to do the work. It's kind of like the Chihuahua that wants to start stuff and then goes and hides behind his buddy, the Rottweiler or the German Shepherd. Those kind of situations are what we're talking about. Are they actually going to be there through thick and thin? And so, because Sweden is in 2020 was spending 1.2% of its GDP on the military, and Finland was not too far above it. Finland this year might go above it due to a large arms purchase, but they were at 1.96. They're a lot closer. Finland is maybe hitting 1.5% of GDP, depending on what source I'm reading. But they're all showing below. And very seriously, Denmark is down like 1.3%, and they're not participating. They're not doing their end of the bargain. So why should we keep them in? Like when it was Travian, I was playing Travian. You'd have people that would join an alliance and never do anything. These would be the guys that, and there's way more than there, and there's not enough countries in the world to make a few alliances to be able to do this much for straight comparison. But in comparison to that, to a gamer situation, I'd be the guy that I had a soft spot plan for small accounts, new players, big soft spot. I was the guy that had to go in and say, okay, do a sit check, see what their account looked like, why is their account low, and try and fix the situation. And some people wouldn't fix it. I mean, if Germany was a Travian account, I'd be like, fix this by this date. Denmark, fix this by this date. I mean, because Sweden and Finland seriously bring territorial control that's strategically important to the alliance, but they're not bringing the arms and munitions and people. They're not spending. And we continue to hear the thunder. I'm not going to re-record this for thunder. But if you can hear the thunder, that's where they're at. I made the comment on Task and Purpose, and this person, ostensibly from Sweden, starts throwing a fit and kept saying, but we've invested so much, and we've invested so much. Why do we have to invest more? Well, this is where the liberals sit there and not consider the consequences of their action or their history. Look at how long, going back to the end of the Cold War, at least a lot of these countries have let their militaries slip. Germany used to have from what I understand, having not served myself, but everything I've understood, during the Cold War, Germany had one of the best armored forces in the world. Now, their top generals telling their chancellor, if we need to go to war for Poland, we don't got an army to send because they haven't maintained their equipment. They haven't updated their equipment. If you don't maintain your military in advance, gone are the days when you could say, we need more troops and more men. Order up a bunch of rifles and you'd have them suddenly. And that's all you need. No, it takes years to develop this equipment, years to build it. You can't build ships like they used to because they're much more complex machines. The lead time on certain materials is much longer. You go to war with the Army, Navy, and Air Force that you have going in at that time. It's not a matter of who can manufacture the most. It's do you have it on hand and can you get it to the front? That's what's going to be the difference. In addition to the tactics of the battlefield, which is a whole other matter. So for Finland and Sweden to be behind, and this person wanted to claim, oh, well, look at how we're investing in our civilian defense. That doesn't repel invasions. Having food supplies for Gotland Island is great, but if you don't have the munitions, if you don't have the people there, if you don't have the weapons to use those munitions, you're not going to repel an invasion. And you look at where Finland sits compared to Russia's only year-round port that's free of ice that doesn't take a choke point. They're in a position to end it right there and turn the North Atlantic into more of a NATO lake than it already is. Finland or Sweden and Denmark form a choke point that means if they want to, Russia ain't getting anything out of the Baltic Sea, which makes the St. Petersburg port borderline useless if NATO decided to shut it down. Not that I would advocate for that short of war, because that is an act of war and we shouldn't do it. But advocating for these countries to come in, it's one thing to say we should have an kind of like enabling acts they used to do for states, like get your amount spent on your defense up to 2% of GDP, or you're not joining, and get it up there consistently. There's no reason to fast track these two countries under the present circumstances, because there's countries already volunteering to stand with them. And as bogged down as Russia is, they're not going to invade. For them to invade, they got to end what they're doing in Ukraine and then rebuild their military at this point. They've lost too much. So there's no reason to fast track it. If they can't, and it's totally reasonable for us to expect them to adhere to this standard, because we got to get everybody else up to that standard, or they need to go. Because you can't just sit there and rely on us, and this is the consequences of your actions thing. If you don't invest in your defense now, you're not going to have a defense when you need it. Just like all of us gun owners say about you got to have the weapon in advance. You can't wait till you have a problem. You can't wait till there's a riot to go buy a gun. You got to have a gun in your house to begin with, or a gun at your business if you're going to defend your business with a gun. You have to do this in advance. It's just like I teach my Subak Do students to practice. If they don't practice, they ain't going to defend themselves. If you don't invest in your defense, you're not going to defend yourself. And that means investing for many years in a row before you you're joining an alliance. That alliance is going to expect you to participate. I mean, Poland, they're arming themselves. They're well armed. They care about their defense. Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, they're finally up to 2% of GDP. And this isn't something where I'm saying, oh, they should spend as much as us, or as much as us per soldier, or as much as us per person. No, it's by your gross domestic product. It has a little bit of a socialistic thing, if your country is small, you're not expected to put in as much. But you're expected to put in 2% of your GDP, 2% of the value of your goods and services that you produce in your country. And if you don't have a population, I mean, let's be honest about it. Luxembourg, what are they going to create? They're going to have 100 and something soldiers, if that, probably in the tens. They're better off. I think they pay for an airlift wing for NATO. That's participation, even if it's not the economic numbers we want. There's no reason Iceland couldn't say, we'll fund an extra, tank brigade of professional soldiers in Germany, or make sure Germany's equipment's up to date. Honestly, they should have a defense, because the entire reason they were allowed into NATO without having a military was because of their location. There's no reason there shouldn't be anti-ship, anti-air and anti-missile defenses all there. Okay, there's no reason they can't do that. Canada, you're another one that is not upholding it, by the way. So that's why I don't want Sweden and Finland in at this time. Down the road, if they get their act together, they actually take defense. And again, Sweden makes equipment that we at least produce for ourselves under license. They make equipment that's good equipment for other countries. So their technology is fine. I can't knock anyone's courage in battle. I haven't served. I have no place knocking that. But I am going to knock the decisions of politicians, and that is one that everybody can have a place in. Because the history of not investing in your defense is you get attacked. The consequences of not investing in there, we know what's going to happen by looking at history. Any student of history knows you better attend to your defense or you're going to regret it. And that means looking at the consequences of your actions. These people that don't want us to have so many aircraft carriers, are you okay with China taking over the South China Sea? The people that want to spend money on defense in Sweden, on military, on their the weapons and people and munitions, if you're not willing to spend that, are you okay with Russia expanding its control into other countries? Are you okay with them testing your air defenses to see if they could actually get away with something? If you're in Finland and you don't want to spend on your military, are you okay with having to scramble like you did in the Winter War? That's the consequences of your actions. And as for the neocons who think that, oh, we got to add these guys. Do you want to get sucked into a war because somebody was thought of as weak, or because somebody decided to get froggy with somebody that was bigger than them? That's exactly how World War I got started. It's because Serbia got a little too froggy with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And when they wouldn't yield on some stuff, it sucked in Russia, and that sucked in Germany, and that sucked in France, and that sucked in Britain, and Belgium, and Netherlands, and eventually it sucked in us. Though we were more co-belligerent. That's the consequences of some of these alliances. If these alliances are of countries that just want to have us as the big dog, we shouldn't be adding them to our alliance. That is not good for the United States. That's the consequences of the action. If you're of the neocon variety, thinking, this is a great idea, let's add Sweden and Finland, think hard about that. Because if they get attacked, Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all, and there's pushing 40 countries in NATO now. Some of them are not going to be getting attacked by anybody directly, but others are. That's the consequences of adding Sweden and Finland. So you have to ask, are you willing to send or expend blood and treasure on Finland? I am not, unless they're going to help themselves. I'm full one to help people, but I'm only one to help those who help themselves. So you have a nice night. It's not raining here yet, but like I said, it is certainly threatening. And I'm going to be getting back to this house tomorrow to try and continue working on it so I can eventually be doing these videos inside. Have a good one.